Hey guys, welcome back to the latest episode of the Growing a Dental Practice podcast. I'm your host, Mike Kennan. In today's episode, I'm joined by Adrian Dray, who is a data protection and GDPR expert. He was the data protection officer for over 600 corporate and independently owned dental practices. And data protection can actually be quite a dry subject. And I think one of Adrian's unique talents is his way to make that engaging. And if you haven't seen any of his social media posts, then you are actually missing out. And I'm sure we'll discuss those in a second. Adrian regularly delivers training to dental teams up and down the country. And on top of that, he's a really nice guy and great to talk to. So welcome to the show, Adrian. Thanks for joining me today. And how are you?
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, pleasure to be here. I'm good, thank you. Yeah, I've been looking forward to this.
Yes, because you're
GDPR.
not yes, and you're not a podcast newbie, are you? So you've done a few of these, haven't you? Or
Done a few of these. Just before this one, I'm editing my own podcast. It will be coming out next week or so. So that's a bit of an exclusive. I'm loving the podcasting world. It's interesting. A lot harder than I realized, Mike. So big respect to you for this. I've learned a lot of tips so far from you. I should be you should be charging me, but we won't talk about that.
Well, yeah, because it's like this is the easiest bit. The talking is the easiest bit. It's all the stuff behind the scenes that you don't see, and you're like, it takes a long time to edit. You know, the social stuff is aggro, and actually now knowing that you've got a podcast coming out, it sort of makes sense as to why your studio setup is so nice.
Oh yeah, I would not be able to justify the expense unless it was for something. I'm not a world famous game streamer or anything like that. So I'm about to go into the podcasting zone. Well, video as well. So it's hence a little bit better lighting. I need as much help as I can, Mike. To be honest with that.
Yeah, fair play. Whatever can help. That's good, man. I might even ask you about the podcast towards the end, actually.
Okay.
So we're going to mainly be talking about sort of data protection and GDPR. But when we were discussing this podcast before, you mentioned that there's some other threats that can face dental practices. But obviously, you're not going to try and scare everyone. You just want to kind of give everyone some, as you put it, hard truths. So we'll run in that second. But before we get to those hard truths, would you mind telling me a bit more about yourself? Your background. How did you get to this point?
Yeah, good question. So, when I was in my youth, when I was at school, I never wanted to grow up and become a data protection expert. I wanted to be the lead singer of a rock band. I happened to do that in my 20s, actually, when I lived in Scandinavia. Life goes on after that, and I when I was didn't pay the bills, but for my day job I worked as a teacher when I was over there. But throughout my career, I've worked in very highly compliant industry situations. So worked for special branch, sort of anti-terrorism. That was part of my time when I was with the police as an engineer. Financial services, so insurance for startups, education, just mentioned. And when GDPR came up, sort of in conversation, I would say, late 2017, it had been rolling up for a little bit, since like 2016, but people didn't really care about it until 17, 18. I thought, wow, this is a flipping boring subject. But I love that because it gives me an opportunity to try and make it engaging. I'm not a miracle worker. I'm not turning water into wine here. But I was looking at some of the webinars and some of the stuff that was coming out. I was like, this is so dry. There has to be a way of making this a lot better. And I happened to stumble across dentistry simply by typing GDPR 4 in Facebook. And the first group that came up was GDPR for dentists. And I went into that, started off with 400 odd members. With a couple of guys, we ran that group, and it went to be just about 4,000 until we turned it off in about 6 months period. And it gave me an opportunity to really get a better understanding of dentistry. And obviously I was learning a little bit more the practicalities and the stumbling blocks of GDPR in business. So it's a fantastic learning experience for me, albeit, I'd got the qualifications and that kind of stuff and had the compliance background. It was brilliant. And then that got me to be a consultant, working with national, international organizations, and then went back to dentistry full-time as the dental data protection officer for my dentist, IDH, which is 600 practices. And then last year, just over a year, become a consultant. So I'm no longer a data protection officer, which is the legally required role. A lot of practices do have it. It's usually the practice manager. What I do is I support them because they, unfortunately, no fault of their own, don't have the knowledge and experience to really back up that role to the full. Not needed every day of the week, but sometimes they're really pressured on getting a response for something, and you need to have someone who knows what they're talking about. It happens to be me without being boastful, because I've seen all sorts of scary, crazy stuff that can happen with data protection, not only for dentistry, but for the other data protection officers that I support across the world, as my peers, paid for or not paid for. So that gives a little bit more confidence to practices to know that, there's someone there who's been through it, can help you through it. Sometimes it's not as scary as you think. Sometimes it's more scary than you think. But at least I can tell the difference between the two. And sometimes that's only experience can get you there.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. Because I remember when GDPR first came in, I was actually at a tech startup, and my job was just to help them try and figure it out. And I wasn't there for very long, let's be honest. But it's a bit of a weird one, isn't it? GDPR, or to me it seems a bit weird.
Yeah, I think weird is exactly the right word, because unlike, I won't get into the weeds of this because it can be quite dry. But in a nutshell, GDPR is a principle-based, risk-based piece of legislation. And what does that mean? Well, the best way to do it is compare it to what else we've got. So, for example, like health and safety, and Legionella, and other areas of legislation, even fire, right? All come under that kind of health and safety branch. That's quite prescriptive. It tells you, right, for this amount of people, you've got to do this. This has to be this temperature. This has to be so far away. This has to be checked every da-da-da-da. GDPR doesn't say that. It's almost a bit of stick your finger in the air and go by your gut. A lot of it can be like that. And we're living in a period now where data is the new oil. The way that commercially we view data, and the way that ethically we view data for our customers and for our patients is very different than it was a few years ago. And also the way that individuals, the way you and I view our data, our privacy, is a lot different than it was a few years ago. Right? So when we look at it like that, it's a constantly evolving process. So this is probably the first hard truth for you. No one will be 100% compliant with GDPR. Not even the Information Commissioner's Office are 100%. It's actually on their website to show that they're not 100% compliant with GDPR. It's about swimming against the current, not getting to the other side. It's two completely different things. Whereas a lot of other pieces of legislation, if you put the time and money, effort into it, you can become 100% compliant with it. So you're thinking, well, what's the flipping point? We'll go through that in this episode.
I was just thinking that.
No,
that
there's no point. Don't do anything.
Don't do it. Yeah. So why is it that other regulations can be very black and white, whereas sort of GDPR and data protection are a bit more grey, if that makes sense?
Well, the thing is that data is so fluid, like oil. It can be used in so many different ways. And what we understand of data now will be very different in a few months, a few years' time, a few decades' time. And one of the biggest issues that we found with the old Data Protection Act 1998, and to think of it, that was in existence for nearly 20 years, before Google, before Facebook, before analytics, before pixels, before complete digitization of the NHS, all these different things. It hadn't been future-proofed. And that's why people didn't take it seriously. It's like, whatever. So that's why 2018 GDPR was such a shock, because oh, wow, okay, we can get fined for millions of pounds now? Where did this come about? So GDPR has to be fairly flexible, and it's a principle-based legislation, not only to kind of fix the situation we're in now, but in some way be actually future-proof. right? So, for example, really quick example, I was just doing a data protection impact assessment. And before people think, oh, flipping, that sounds boring, this was actually quite interesting. It uses virtual reality, artificial intelligence for students that are going through sort of interview-based scenarios. The avatar is artificially intelligent driven. It picks up on their semantic data, so their eye movement, their head movement, also their tone of voice, their stuttering, their hesitation. It picks that feedback up, and the avatar, the AI, will then react accordingly. Right? How cool! That's amazing. But I had to look at the fact:
Awesome.
is someone's voice data biometric information? Can someone be identified just by saying, "Hello, my name is Adrian Dray"? Right? Now, I'm talking about this in the wider area, because, for example, when you call up your bank, my voice is my password. You ever had to do that? Right? It's
Yeah.
because that's connected to me and it's based on a previous recording. But what if that becomes identified? What if that becomes like a fingerprint? Do you know an ear is like a fingerprint? Ears are unique. Your fingerprint, obviously, your strand levels of your DNA. So you have to almost think. I mean, dental practice is not going to have to go through this level, but you have to think, okay, what potentially could happen in the future without living in the hypothetical? It's a bit of a crazy thing. Health and safety doesn't do that. You know, you fall down the
Yeah.
stairs, you could break your
Yeah.
neck. It's a bit easier, you know. So with data, is that
Oh my
there are
word.
some unknowns to it. Yeah.
Because this is, I guess, like so it's so rapidly changing. Like, technology is, just changes so much anyway.
Mm.
Data's the same thing. Yeah, mad. Honestly, as soon as you started saying the voice things, I was like, oh no, what's next?
Well, yeah, Skynet probably,
Oh
Terminator.
dear. Well, hasn't Musk already put that up in the sky? Like, isn't that a thing already?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, good old Elon. Be
Oh well,
careful,
yeah.
mate.
So you obviously mentioned fines. What are some of what can go wrong if a practice doesn't take this seriously, or doesn't have a meaningful grasp on it?
Good question. Whenever I'm trying to sell data protection services, whether I like it or not, it's not sexy. It's not that people aren't doing it to better themselves. It hasn't got the greed element, as salespeople will say. Unfortunately, it's based on fear. That's the reality of it. And the reality of any kind of compliance, why else would you do it? What is the wolf at the door, right? So in 2018, we thought the wolf at the door was the ICO is going to fine people for putting 1 foot wrong, not having one piece of paper in place. They're going to get hit, bang, 20 million euro fine. Send an email to the wrong person, marketing email without consent, right, 20 million euro fine. That didn't happen. That wolf at the door exists. It's got really big teeth, but it's got pretty much a massive muzzle on it because the ICO are a pragmatic regulator. The thing is what's happened over the last few years is realizing what the other wolves at the door are. This is really important when you're assessing any kind of risk. Take away the fact that it's actually people's personal data, sensitive personal data, and if that got compromised, it could be a big issue for them. That's really important, obviously ethically. But when it comes down to it, businesses care about what happens to them. So the first thing is reputation damage. If you've got a dental practice that's serving a local community and a box of records gets compromised, right? Kids start going through and taking pictures of it, putting it up on the local Facebook group. Or you've got a receptionist that clicks on a dodgy email, downloads ransomware, now have lost 3 years worth of data because the data hadn't been backed up correctly. Or we've got an issue where you move from one system to another and all that data gets corrupted. So you've got a new system, but the data is almost worthless. You haven't got any x-rays, for example. The record isn't complete. Now, what's the issue for patients? Well, the confidentiality side of things, it can be pretty bad. I mean, I don't think anyone's going to care about, a dead tooth from the 1970s. But if you've got a medical history form, which talks about people's, more sensitive areas of healthcare, perhaps are HIV positive, then that is really bad. That is going to affect your reputation because you have a duty as a healthcare organization to maintain people's confidentiality. So what would happen then if that goes out into the wider area? What if the local community find out? What if it became headline news? We've got a lot of stuff going on at the moment. I don't think anyone's going to particularly care about that, but local communities might. Well, I'm not going to take my kids there anymore, says one family. So you Google that in, I wonder what they're like as a practice. I might get my Invisalign done there, and it comes up with local practice. It leaks the data of HIV positive patient. No, I'm not going to go there. That's showing what we were talking about earlier, is that people taking their privacy rights far more seriously than they ever did. Right? I'm quite, even though I work in GDPR, I'm fairly flexible on my data, but something like that's particularly sensitive, I wouldn't want to associate myself with them. Surely would not want to be a custodian of my data. That's just on the confidentiality side. The availability side of things, if you lost 6 months, 3 years worth of data, is that going to massively impact people's dental care? Probably not. If you've had consultations recently, then yes, bite wings, OPGs have been taken. You're opening them up to maybe radiation risks, but it's not like other healthcare organizations that rely on the availability of long-term data to be able to treat that person, right? But then just think about it just from the business perspective. Well, I need that data to understand my recall list, or I need to be able to analyze that data to see if we need to get another hygienist or an associate or that kind of thing. You need data to make proper decisions about your business. So if you lose that, for example, through ransomware or something else, you've lost opportunity, massive opportunity that your competitor can go and take. Because as much as we love each other in dentistry, I tell you what, people next door practice don't love each other so much, right? So it's a thing about that. Lost opportunity is a really, really big thing. And the last one, because obviously you can tell I'm quite passionate about this, but the last one is a case of the compensation claims that are coming through. So the ICO might become aware of a data breach, let's say, or an infringement or a complaint. They might not do anything about it. Probably won't. If I put money on it, they probably won't do anything about it. They're like, well, learn your lesson, don't do it next time. Can't say they're going to be like that forever. But what happens is data protection compensation lawyers get behind it. And I'm looking at claims in excess of £5,000 where dental health records have been compromised. Because there's a responsibility that's there, a duty of confidentiality, and that's been breached. So it's not a good situation to be in. It can happen to anyone. But hopefully we can give you some top tips here to sort of avoid some of the main ones that I see on a regular basis.
Yeah, excellent. That's a really good summary. And actually, I think that's why people are quite happy to listen to you, Adrian, is because you are passionate about what you say, and that really comes through. So then that's your sort of secret sauce, I think, is the fact that you actually care about it.
Yeah, I try to. Well, you got to, haven't you, with these things? We want to be able to help people. I don't want anyone to get fined. I don't want anyone to have reputation damage and that kind of stuff. But unfortunately, we don't live in that world. It's one of those things.
Yeah.
But try and be passionate about it, and people get it then.
Yeah, exactly. So you've talked about some of the risks and some of the sort of the downsides of not getting it right. What can practices sort of do or should be doing to sort of protect themselves from any sort of future?
It's a big question. I'll try and be as succinct in my answers. I think the first thing is your mindset. I mean, heck, we hear that with everything, don't we? Culture is very important. If you think that because you've passed a CQC inspection that you are compliant with GDPR, you are very much mistaken. It's like me saying, oh, I passed a CQC inspection, my accounts must be all in order. Okay, ICO and CQC has a little bit more of an overlap because CQC are interested in confidentiality of personal data. But data protection is far more than that. And I get really peed off, if that's all right to say, Mike, if I beat that out otherwise, is that what do we call them? Dental compliance solution providers say, oh, we've got everything you need to get past the CQC inspection. Well, I'll be honest, it ain't much. But everything else that's in those things is pretty poor, in my understanding. Now, of course, you won't be 100% compliant, but I think if you do not have the wool pulled over your eyes to think that as long as you pass a CQC inspection, everything is okay. Now, that's not me saying that you've got to spend thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds to get everything sorted out, everything ticked off. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that you need to have your wits about you with things, and understanding that the data protection is a mix of privacy. So whether what we're doing with data is fair, is correct, is lawful, is accurate, and also the security side of things, it's available, it's confidential, it's the integrity is at a good standard. They're two separate things, privacy and security. So the privacy side sometimes is quite easy to do in dentistry because we've got a good reason for doing stuff. The security side of things is probably a little bit more tricky because the biggest threat vector, people do argue with this, but I'm going to stick to it within dentistry. The biggest threat vector is human error. So like I said earlier, a receptionist clicking on, I've seen this so many times, Mike, a receptionist clicking on an email that will download an attachment, which then infects the whole system with ransomware. And the next day, the principal turns on their computer, like, oh, here we go, R4's down again. No, what it is, R4 is down because a hacker's got in and has deleted all of your data for a ransom, and they want 50 grand's worth of Bitcoin with it. And people think, that never happens. I never hear that. Well, of course, it never hears it. Who is ever going to admit to that? Who would ever admit that I've been hacked? No one. Does it happen? Yes. Guess who hears about it? Me. Right? So I think that I'm trying to remember the question now, Mike, but one of the main things is that if one takeaway from this episode is make sure your staff, including your associates, are doing regular data protection training. And I mean, that's the first thing they do when they start your practice, and they do it every year. A lot of the dental data protection training isn't great. There's a lot of errors with it. So the best ones to go for is the NHS e-learning for health training. It's not CPD, but I tell you what, you want to get it right over for CPD. Get that, sign up for it. It's free. And that's going to put you in a much better posture when it comes to security. And also something you can actually back up because you're trying to sort out one of the main areas of threats, which is human error. Doesn't stop everything, but certainly what's one of the main things to look at.
Brilliant. That's a fantastic tip. Does that course automatically update or get updated, or is it just the same course?
Yeah, it gets regularly updated because the hacker's arbitrage, what we call it, is constantly changing. So they're using different techniques. To quickly give you a very, very quick example, a 15-year-old, 14, 15-year-old now, who's done a bit of coding at school, likes Minecraft, has heard about Bitcoin, seen friends that are driving really nice cars who left school a few years after them thinking how they get that. I'll tell you how they get it. They go on the dark web, they buy a pack called How to Hack a Dental Practice, and it's a whole managed service. All they've got to do is find the practice, deliver the email, manage it from there, and then what happens? A whole back-end system, telephone number comes up, call this to pay the Bitcoin. The main hacker group that have provided these packs will take their cut, and they just go on to another one. According to a new latest report, a new business gets hit by ransomware every 11 seconds. A new business across the world. So it's a case of, and that's not to freak people out. I'm just saying that the case of it's a sobering stuff. Printing up a template from your dental compliance solution provider does not mean that you're going to be hacker-proof.
Mm-hmm.
It just means you haven't taken it seriously. That is straight to the point. Is that you need to make sure that people, your staff, are being security conscious. And and hopefully there are tools out there for it.
Yeah, amazing. I didn't know that, or I wasn't aware of that. I just thought it was hackers sitting in a room somewhere trying to make their own money, but I didn't realize they were then now offering that as a service.
Yeah,
which is both from my side fascinating, like pretty entrepreneurial from that side, but also pretty scary for the rest of us.
Yeah, and I think we are becoming a little bit more careful with things now. I've seen it recently in Facebook groups where people have said, is this a dodgy email? And it is. I've given a response. These are the things to look out for. But I managed to get the username and password from a receptionist in under a minute the other day as a test. One of my clients. So I spoke to my client. I had a look at their privacy notice, which is on the website, as you'll know, Mike. And on that privacy notice, it listed all of the IT suppliers that they use. So who does their IT support, what system they use, who they use to back up. And I'm like, right, I've seen this before. I've seen this template before, because that's I'm not bashing all dental compliance solution providers. And if you're listening, guys, please change your flipping template. But it says you have to name everyone who you share data with. You don't. You talk about the categories like IT providers, but you don't name who they are, particularly in a healthcare situation where it's very specific. So I called up as a social engineering thing, as a test, on the condition that the receptionist did not get in trouble for this, and said, "Oh, hi, I'm calling from XYZ IT. We're having some problems with the backups at the moment. We can't back up your SOE, let's say, software of excellence, to XYZ backup provider. Really having some problems with it. If we don't get this sorted now, we could lose all the data. Can I dial in? I just need to use name and password." Handed it over. With
Wow.
under a minute.
But that would have been so easy though, wouldn't it? If you sound confident, you're calling from where the person that they're aware of. That could happen to anyone.
Yeah, exactly. But had that person had the training, which they hadn't, by the way, had they had been training, it's like, you never give over your username and password over the phone, or something like that, someone you don't even know. Then that would have been better. But I can't actually blame the receptionist for that. And the principal was furious because he thought, why do I pay all this money to this compliance solution provider when they actually, they're actually causing risks than anything? I said, well, the thing is, how come you haven't ensured that people are being trained? I have to, and as a consultant, I can be a little bit, a bit open and sobering with that. But that's the fact of the matter. You have to have a responsibility. There is accountability, which is a fundamental principle of GDPR. And I'll bang that drum for forevermore, Mike, and people getting proper training as they start and on a regular basis, because it's stopping a lot of those main risks.
Yeah, man, that's a great point though, because you definitely shouldn't be like listing out your specific suppliers.
It's nuts.
Just that's a world of pain. Yeah, it's yeah. You can mention Google because everyone's using Google, but I wouldn't list the individual supplier.
Yeah.
No, that's great. That's great. So obviously the audience for this podcast is sort of new and aspiring practice owners.
Yeah.
So if I am a associate taking the plunge and becoming a practice owner, and I've started a squat practice, what are the first things that I should do from a sort of data protection and GDPR perspective?
So if you're at squat practice, what I would say is you're going to have suppliers that you're going to be sharing data with, or going to be processing data on your behalf. So that would be things like, if you say, for example, you're taking on Dentally, cloud-based supplier, they're holding a lot of your data, or anyone who's backing up your data, destroying your data, all of those sorts of things. Who am I handing data for, and for what for? External parties, right, that are doing it based on my instruction. Now, anyone like that, you want to make sure that you've got contracts in place. You know what those contracts are, and those contracts have the associated data protection clauses in them. Okay, not expecting you to know exactly what has to be in there off the top of your head. And if you go to the ICO's website and you put in contracts as a search term, it will give you a little checklist on things to make sure are in those contracts. Okay. Now, a lot of these suppliers have got these sorted because they're getting asked about them all the time, right? If they don't, then I would look to get one written up, basically. That's really, really important. I say that purely because, and the best piece of advice I ever heard is, start up a business as if you're going to sell it, right? If you're looking to sell your business, one of the things that really holds people back is they can't find the contracts because it's buried in someone's mailbox. I'm guilty of it as well, but it's buried in someone's mailbox, and hasn't been set aside. So that's a really important one. So start as you mean to go on when it comes to that. Make sure, if you didn't guess, make sure everyone's getting trained properly. The second thing is make sure your physical security is correct in your practice. Don't jump into getting CCTV. CCTV is a privacy nightmare. If you're going to get that done, then get professional support. Not touting for business that, but get professional support and making sure that you're getting the right things right. It's a compensation nightmare. If you don't get that right, and I've seen all sorts where principals, I thought, what would be a good idea if I video and capture the audio of my staff in the staff room. I can listen when they're talking about me, and then I'll sack anyone who's talking crap about me, right? My word, you might as well just write a blank
People
text
do
check.
that.
I hear that on a monthly basis.
What the hell?
So 6-year statute limitations for data protection claims. So if anyone's listening now thinking, my boss did that a few years ago. Google data protection law. That's how serious it is. Not encouraging people to sue their practices, but anyone that if you've got something like that, right? It's highly unethical. Highly unethical. The next thing is probably if you're using a system like R4 or Software of Excellence, which is server-based, or even Dentally, actually, where the X-rays have to be local, make sure your backups are complete, make sure they're done regularly, and make sure they're monitored. These are really important things. Every time that someone gets hacked or someone loses their data, first thing they say to me, Adrian, I never thought this would happen to me. Every time. Every single time. And then I asked them, I said, when was it last checked? Oh, well, we never do that. Well, we leave that to blah, blah, blah IT company. Oh, well, let's have a look at their contract. Oh, here, they actually limit their liability, so you can never come back to them. You can never sue them for that. So make sure that they're complete, they're capturing everything, that they're accurate, they're monitored regularly. You want to have them to be off-site, so cloud-based, and try and have it at least every day for something like that, especially when we're living in such a litigious society where you've got dental law people that are trying to sue dental practices. So you need to have those records, not only to treat those people, but you need to have those records to be able to defend yourself 5-10 years down the line. What else? Try to be paperless as much as possible. And I would say, look, even though I've given a bit of a bash in the dental compliance solution providers, you know what? A lot of what they've got there is okay, it's passable. But what I would say is that if you want to take it seriously, if you want to be better off, sometimes it's good to get the professionals to come in just to put you in a reasonable level of assurance. You're not going to be 100% compliant, but at least you want to be in a situation where I can sleep at night. That's I think is what most of us want to have.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think, as a practice manager or a principal, you have to know so many different things that how can you be expected to know everything about data protection and GDPR?
Yeah.
So, why not kind of you're not relieving yourself of the responsibility, like you're still responsible, but having someone like yourself coming in and checking everything over and giving you the
I think
giving the once
sometimes
over is
it's a case of just being empowered by the knowledge. It's a case of, I'm a nerd with this kind of thing. But I mean, I have a day course. I'm not trying to tout for business here, but I don't know, because I don't know when the next one I'm going to do. But I have a day course which is live, it's over Zoom, and I have between 5 and 10 practice owners, practice managers there. And we go through some stuff I wish I knew 4 years ago before I became a DPO for hundreds of dental practices. Now, this course does not make you 100% compliant. It doesn't make you anywhere near that. What it does is it gives you contextual knowledge to be able to understand some of these concepts and how they work in real life. And we have conversations. It's 6 hours, pretty hard going. But with the group, we have conversations and people say, well, I do it like this, Adrian. Is that right? I said, well, we could look at it like this. And we have an hour call afterwards, which they can take up within 6 months, which means they could book a call with me and we can go through something specific one-to-one. But what that does is that empowers that individual to the point where if an associate's kicking off and saying, well, I've been told this, that, and the other, they can say, well, actually, I've been on a course of Adrian Dray who's seen thousands of different issues like this, and he's shown me this. Or you've had a patient that's kicked off that's saying, you caused a data breach. No, actually, it's not a data breach. Okay, we may have got something wrong, but we're not going to be paying you £5,000 compensation. I'm sorry, but that's not going to happen. Things like this. People have asked for certain data. Dental law, solicitors are asking for all this information. Well, people off my course will know they're not entitled to all that information. Empowerment, confidence. That's what I'm trying to give people. And often, if you got that, you're in a much better situation because you can actually have a healthy appetite for risk. And right, I've got, as you said, Mike, a billion other things to do. I'm not going to drown myself in this particular area of compliance. I'm going to make sure I've got these things in and I know what I'm actually looking at. Because otherwise, you're going to think, if I get this one letter wrong, I'm going to get a fine. So it's moving you away from that level of thinking.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. Because if you had that hanging over your head and you were constantly scared of it, you'd struggle to do anything, wouldn't you? Like if you really let it get to you.
Oh yeah. I've had many a sleepless night, so other people don't. It's my pitch.
Fair. Love that. But no, that's great, Adrian. You mentioned quite a lot of things that like a squat practice can do to sort of protect themselves. I'm assuming like a lot of that would also be if you were buying would carry over if you were buying an existing practice. Are there any things that you should do if you're buying an established practice? Like, is there anything slightly different, or what you should do when you get in?
I think if you're buying an established practice, whether it's from a corporate or an independent, you want to know what the situation is with the paper records. So this catches people out a lot. And every time this comes up in a course, at least one person will say, we've been in that situation. Or I know someone who's been in that situation. I bought practices exactly like that. What is the situation? Well, they didn't do their due diligence properly. They didn't ask about paper records. Buy this practice, great location, lovely staff, all this kind of stuff. It's got 2 or 3 garages full of records that have just been thrown in there. What are you going to do with them? They're your records now. How long is it going to take for you to sort through them, to get them secure, to be able to find them in the event you get hit by a record request from a dental legal solicitor? So I would find out exactly what's going on. Some buyers won't care, because they don't know. But feel empower that knowledge that when you're going into a practice, make sure you have an understanding of exactly what is going on. The other thing that I would say when it comes to paper records, the other thing I would say is find out if there's been any kind of data protection complaints or data breaches at that practice. Particularly, you want to see the communications that have been made to the data subjects, for example, the patient, and to the regulator, here the ICO, because there is a 6-year statute of limitations for compensation claims off the back of that. So at the time, maybe 2 years ago, there was a breach and you told the patient, oh, sorry, this, that, blah, blah, blah happened, and they didn't care about it. But unless that was settled, they've still got a few more years to come back, now finding out, oh, Julie down the road, she got 10 grand from so-and-so because they breached their data. She just Googled it. Well, guess what that person's going to do? They're going to get that same lawyer or someone similar to now come after the practice because they heard the word data breach and made that connection. So you want to make sure that you're not buying what's called a data lemon, Harvard University term there, a data lemon, because it can be the thing that really makes your business suffer. So most practices, or a lot of practices, don't have that. I hope that remains the same, but there are plenty that want to get rid because of that. So be careful. Be careful. Grass is not always the greener, but that's not to put it off from expanding.
No, that's brilliant. No, perfect, Adrian. Thank you very much. So we're going to start to wind the podcast down. So what I'd love to know, Adrian, is what is your number one piece of advice for new and aspiring practice owners? What's that one thing that you'd like them to take away from this episode?
Other than what I've already said, the one piece of advice that I would say that I haven't covered right now is for aspiring practice owners, one of the biggest tools at the moment in marketing your practice is before and after images, video testimonials. that kind of thing. One of the big shocks that comes to both practice owners, but particularly associates, is that the associate themselves are responsible for getting the consent from the patient to use those images on their own social media channels. So I have, and this is a shameless pitch now, Mike, but I have created a training course. It's online, 1 hour CPD for associates to make them aware of their own risk, to make sure that they've got the right forms in place. Because I will tell you now, I can count on one hand how many forms I have seen from associates that were nearly right. Okay. Not that we're right, we're nearly right. So this is one that's been tried and tested. That they can complete this training and get those forms. Because whilst we've been talking about hacking, whilst we've been talking about everything else, the big area now where dentists, and I'm talking about associates, but also practices, but mostly associates are getting hit, is because they've used patient images where those patients can be identified. And it goes into a little bit more about anonymous and identified images without getting the proper consent. And what the patient can do is not only sue that dentist under GDPR, but also claim royalties for the use of their images. Because if that dentist has got thousands of followers, what the legal case that's being put against them is, well, you must have used those images in your sales process, in your marketing, to be able to close thousands of pounds worth of Invisalign treatment, for example. I'd like to have a cut of that, please. So you need to be aware of that. So that's something I'm really shouting from the rooftops, because pretty much everyone who's on social media who uses it for business purposes and posts identifiable patient images are at risk. And that is a very, very real risk that is just on the increase.
Yeah, man, that is a really, really, I guess, hot topic, isn't it? Because, social media, it's been around a few years now, but it's still, ever present, ever increasing. New channels, TikTok and stuff coming along.
Yeah.
Only going to get worse, I guess. So how can people get on that course, Adrian?
I can send you a link for it, Mike, if you want to put it in the show notes. But if you go to, I will have to get this set up for when
this is a test
comes out. Yeah. If you type in learn.adriandray.consulting, then you'll be able to see it on there. If you go to my Instagram, which is adriandray.consulting, there'll be a link in bio to go straight to it. Actually, I think there's a coupon on there. Mike, you know what? I'll give you a coupon. How about that?
Ooh,
so
fantastic.
all your listeners can have that. So that'll be good for them. But this is for associates.
Excellent.
If you're thinking, what about for practices? Practices can go on there too, to be honest. But this is more aligned for associates because they seem to be the biggest target at the moment.
Yeah, no, that's perfect, Adrian. Thank you very much. And finally, how can listeners that are scared shitless about what they've heard today, how can they get in contact with you?
So a couple of ways. So full disclosure, I do a lot of non-dental GDPR work. So my dental stuff is based on my availability. So what I would say is you should be able to see my calendar link on adriandray.consulting. Book a call with me. Let's see what we can do. If I'm not available to help, I've got some really good recommendations for you. Then they're not dental specific, but I support them on any dental stuff. But I trust them far more than I do anyone else in the dental space that isn't me. So I think that's probably the best way. Everyone's got different problems. There's no fixed service for this. Everyone's got a different thing. So I would say that adriandray.consulting and get in touch, or Facebook, Instagram, that kind
of Facebook. Yeah, excellent. Because you're pretty prominent in some of the biggest sort of dental groups, aren't you? So
yeah, try to be.
Yeah, try to be. Yeah, excellent, perfect. Well, Adrian, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. I've learned a lot, and I'm actually on one of your courses soon, so I'm looking forward to learning.
Yes, you are. I've got to email you the link later today. Yeah, about that. Yeah, I'm looking for that, Mike. So you'll get a bit of an insight into how that goes.
Yeah, proper insight into it, because from a marketing side, I should know that as well, or I feel like I should have a better understanding of it. So I'm looking forward to that. So anyway, I'll leave you to the rest of your day, and we'll catch up soon.
Lovely.
Cheers,
Thank you ever so much. Cheers, Mike.